All right.
And let's just restart the conversation that we just spent 10 minutes having, and then
Okay, I
decided to
guess. Well,
record
we'll
it.
try to go back over the. We don't have to hit every point, but
No,
we'll
no,
go back over a little bit.
we were mostly talking about subtitles and early anime. So
Yeah. So.
let's
Go
start.
ahead.
Let's start with a different starting point, and we can work our way back to subtitles now.
Okay.
One of the things that I love talking to younger anime fans about is the struggle of getting shows to watch back when you and I started watching.
Sure.
So like you had to like find people online that would mail you tapes that someone had edited with someone had done like they'd done subtitles and recorded them to a VHS tape, and then they were shipping them from person to person, and people would copy them, and you could see all these shows that nobody was ever planning on releasing here from
It was like
Japan.
fucking samizdat back in Soviet Russia. It was
Yeah.
ridiculous. like you would get some VHS tape that would have like a sticker with like the word Dragon Ball Z something or other scrawled on it. You'd be like, oh, I've been meaning to see these ones.
And it would just be like nowadays I buy a lot of DVDs, and sometimes I don't even take the plastic off them. I put them on a shelf, and then 2 years later I'm like, oh, I never got around to watching this. But when you
Right.
got those tapes back then, after you'd fought so long and hard to get a copy of something, you watched it that night.
Oh yeah. Even if you had to watch it deep into the morning.
'Cause
I mean, it got a little. It got a little bit better later on, but I remember having a lot of really tough times with like somebody would after the VHS era and getting into the start of the internet era, it was like first off you had to figure out how to get the files. Once you figured out how to get the files, you had to figure out how to play the files, and sometimes that would be like incredibly difficult. Like there were 150 different competing codecs back in the day. Like, and then like MKV came out and people started using that, and 10-bit came out and people started using that. But really in the early day, you had problems where like the audio wouldn't even play. Like I remember I had some episodes of Rurouni Kenshin, and they were terrible quality. They were like 320 by 240 or something like that video, but the audio was even worse. It was the worst. It was the worst case of having to figure out how to run the codec that I've ever experienced. What you had to do to get sound for these Rurouni Kenshin episodes, and I was only able to do it once because I couldn't find the website a second time when I had to look. But what you had to do is there was one guy who had a website where he wrote down a set of ASCII characters that you had to copy and then paste into a DLL file somewhere on your computer, replacing some other block of text. So you had to like pixel perfect grab or character perfect grab this set of characters and then character perfect insert it into this other DLL, and you couldn't really tell whether the thing you were doing was going to work or not until you tried it, because these weren't text files, these were binary files. So you were just like literally switching some kind of weird piece of code with some other weird piece of code, but like it suddenly magically made the audio work. And it worked until I had to get a new computer, and then I wasn't able to reproduce the thing because I couldn't find the guy's website again. Like that was the worst. Like I had been watching those episodes with no sound, and I'm like, and I kept looking online. I'm like, these episodes have no sound, but like they had, the size was big enough that you could tell there was sound, and so it was like, well. And it was just this one guy figured it out, and it was like the fix was absurd. Why? I mean, what did I even do to that DLL? I don't know.
Yeah, you're sitting there messing with a DLL file, and the next thing you know, it's like you're watching your show, and everything's fine, and later on, you turn your computer, and the little Microsoft paperclip pops up, but he's just a corpse. What did you do to me? I can't help anything now.
But it was a slog sometimes. Like even figuring out which video player to watch stuff with would be different. Like VLC Media Player came out and had a terrible interface, but played damn near everything. And then there was other competitors for that. God.
Yeah, and it was it was nothing like it is now. Like I remember you would have to it was like $24.95 or maybe even $29.99 half the time to get a VHS with 2 episodes on it, and you'd go into the video cassette store, usually a Suncoast, and in the early days a Best Buy before everyone switched over to DVDs.
Yeah.
And you would shop around, and there'd be like the 3rd tape of a series you wanted to watch. So there was none of that back then. There was none of that. Oh, I'm just gonna start the series from the beginning and go through. No, it's like
everything was piecemeal.
Yeah,
everything.
You picked up that 3rd tape because it probably wouldn't be there if you didn't.
Oh yeah, no, I remember. That's what happened to me with Ranma 1/2. Is that I just randomly grabbed things that I could find at the video store, and it's like, okay, this is, I don't know which number, and like they weren't even numbered well. Like it was like, this one says it's 4, but this one says it's 4, and this one says it's 3, but it comes after both of these 4s. So what the hell's going on here?
Fortunately, with Ranma, it didn't really matter, and that was like,
no, that's true.
That was one of the only like series that actually came out over here. Most of it was movies or like special edition. I can't even recall another major series that was really coming out on VHS when Ranma first started coming out.
Yeah.
There was like Tenchi.
Well, Tenchi Muyo was Tenchi Muyo. The original Tenchi Muyo OVAs are the second. It was like the first DVD box set that I ever bought. Man, I still have it. I watched it a while back. It's like, and it cost like, it was the original 2-season OVA of Tenchi Muyo, Tenchi Ryuoki, and it was like seven long episodes, 7 45-minute episodes, and like the box set was like, God, what was it, $180 or something like that?
Yeah.
And it was like 3 DVDs and a couple of little tchotchkes inside the box.
Yeah, everything was a lot more expensive then too, because
there was no competition.
Well, that, and especially because it was VHS, and you could record VHS 3 ways. You could set it to, what was it, SLP, SP, and LP.
SP, SLP, and EP, yeah.
EP, yeah, and it was like 6 hours, 4 hours, and 2 hours. And you didn't want to record anything in 6 hours unless it was just total garbage to begin with, because the quality of the tape would be terrible. So basically, all things that were released on VHS came in SP. Or yeah. I think SP was the shortest one. Just a 2 hour.
SP was the shortest one, 2 hours per tape.
Yeah, and so most of those tapes had 2 episodes of something on them. Some of them they started releasing later on with 4. But I think like with the Ranma tapes, they were always 2 episodes. And so you were spending $30 a pop for 2 episodes, as opposed to like $10 a month now to watch Crunchyroll whenever you feel like it.
Yeah, basically. Or I mean, like right now you get a box set and it costs $40, and it contains 4 DVDs, 2 Blu-rays, an art book, a soundtrack, and a stand-up figure.
Yeah. And not to mention that like you would have almost a whole collection of tapes. You'd have like 20 tapes for a series, and there'd be one missing, and you'd go 5 years before you finally found a copy of it, and it was a DVD that had 6 of the other ones on it anyway. So your VHS collection became a moot point at that point.
Well, I mean, the VHS collection became a moot point gradually because the deterioration rate on those tapes was pretty high.
It wasn't terribly high. I mean,
it was decent. I mean, depending on storage conditions and things like that. I mean,
it's storage
the thing is
conditions,
that they're bulky. They're bulky, and storing them properly is even more bulky, and also requires a lot of space in an area that doesn't have humidity or sunlight, basically. And
basements are a good storage place for VHS.
Well, they are sort of, but it's usually too humid in basements, to my understanding.
Well, I've got a collection of VHS tapes that still play just as good as they did, 25 years ago. So
yeah, fair enough.
They don't, if they're taken care of, they have some lasting power. Yeah. You just don't want to play them in a dirty VCR and ruin them, really.
Right.
But it was It was a bit more of an adventure to watch it back then. Plus, you had the ability to be an elitist about things because nobody knew what you were talking about when you were talking about anime around like 2000.
Well, I think elitist is the wrong word.
Retard? Is that what?
Yeah, retard is closer. I mean, like, if you went off talking about the latest fansub the latest fansub of such and such that you found on eBay for $30.
People thought you were talking about like lab equipment or something.
Well, no, it's not that. It's number one is that you were talking about cartoons, and number two is that you were saying that you spent $30 to watch an hour of cartoons, which is like to the average person was just insane.
And not unlike most science fiction things that have become very mainstream, that ended really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I remember when Sci-Fi Channel came out with the Saturday anime thing back in, God, when did that start? That started when I was in...
That was around...
I was in 4th grade, I think.
Yeah, it was like just
So
when
that
I
would
was
have been like
coming into
1990.
middle school, I think.
Yeah, it would have been 1990. No, I mean, no, right when you were, you would have been in 6th grade at the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was in 4th grade, and that started up. And that was pretty cool. I mean, you had Project Echo, you had Vampire Hunter D, you had Demon City Shinjuku, you had...
8 Man After.
You had Kashan, whatever they called it. That was pretty cool, too.
That's one I never actually saw.
The original Kashan was pretty good. They later on did a series called Kashan Sins, which was a little too artsy.
Yeah, they had that whole era where they started to get artsy with everything, and like there was that show that we watched that was like
Kaiba.
Yeah, something like that where we were watching it and you said this is what happens when someone puts a gun to someone's head and says make art.
Yeah, that's right. We watched the first 2 episodes, and then the last episode we're like, we don't really care what happens in between.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
It was all drawn like a Saturday morning commercial for Lucky Charms or something.
It was really like, like very, very bright colors. It was a weird looking show, and the plot was really odd too. What little bit of it that we understood.
Well, I think there only was a little bit of it.
I don't know. We only saw 3 episodes, and we dropped the middle 10. So we may have missed an epic tale, but I kind of doubt it.
It was art masquerading as a show with a mild dystopian theme.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good way to describe it.
But yeah, I still love the stuff today, and most of what I'm collecting now is the older stuff that I wanted to watch that I never got around to. Like, I finally completed my Dirty Pair collection.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good show.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would say it's good. Like, I've never watched all of the TVs.
Oh, come on, it's incredibly entertaining.
It's entertaining, yeah, but it's like, remember the old Ninja Turtles cartoon? Like, it wasn't really that well written, and, it was kind of goofy, but it was really fun to watch, and that's kind of how I feel about Dirty Pair.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't tried to watch the Ninja Turtles cartoon was actually pretty decently well written compared to most other kids' cartoons at the time.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
but it was also the most popular cartoon.
That's also true.
But it was still goofy if you go back and watch it.
Well, of course, but it was intentionally goofy. They broke the fourth wall all the time in that show.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that... Dirty Pair was also intentionally goofy. I recently showed one of our friends the Halloween episode where it's like Kay and Yuri are chasing what looks like a Terminator on Halloween while these 3 different bandit groups are trying to rob like a museum and a bank and everything, and they're all dressed up as like one of them is this giant woman with Popeye arms that's dressed up as Snow White. There's a group that's dressed up as the characters from Alice in Wonderland, and actually in that episode there's a brief shot of they cut to some characters on the street that are watching some of the fighting going on, and there's a Ninja Turtle in there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of that stuff they did lots of... I mean, Project Echo was like that, too. They did huge amounts of parody of both, like, American stuff and earlier Japanese stuff.
Yeah, well, Project Echo was a huge parody project in its own right. I mean, it was making fun of all of the anime of the time, and then, of course, other things, too.
I picked up the same collection that you recently picked up, too, the Project Echo collection DVDs, and it amazed me. How do I put this? Each one of the episodes of the first series, like the first four, not Red Side, not Gray Side, Blue Side. I haven't actually watched that DVD again yet, but I watched the other ones, and each one of those episodes has like one sequence that is animated at like 30 frames per second, and it's gorgeous. Like the pool, the billiards scene in Cinderella Rhapsody, right at the beginning. And you like watch it, and you're like, "Holy hell! These guys knew exactly what they were doing." And then the billiard scene ends, and the whole thing is just like goofiness, and it's like, wow. Or I mean, the start of the original Project A-ko was like amazing mecha design for like a science fiction show. Like it was so good. Well, and like just the framing of the shots and the way that the music kicked in and everything.
The original Project A-ko. So my two favorite animated movies are Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind and Castle of Cagliostro.
Yeah.
Now, the original Project A-ko is almost an easy third. The only reason that Riding Bean beats it is because I like Riding Bean the character better. But the movie Project A-ko is one of the most ambitious science fiction parody movies, and it also has like it's kind of it's a parody, but it's also like got this serious undertone to it, where it's this death brawl between two characters, and one of them doesn't even want to fight, but she does anyway, and it's
well, it's really good.
It's an amazing movie, and it's a good movie too. It's not even one of them ones where it's just like it's good because it's campy and corny. It's
actually really good.
Yeah. Now the other ones, like Uncivil Wars, which I don't think was the title in Japan, but that's what they labeled it when it came out here.
No, of course not. Yeah.
It was Project A-ko, Gray Side and Blue Side. That was pretty good too, but it wasn't. It felt more like a TV special than.
Gray Side, Blue Side was just not really a parody. Gray Side, Blue Side was like a reboot of a parody without the parody anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It was good, but it wasn't. It didn't have that bite to it.
Yeah, it was a good action movie for sure.
It was a good sci-fi action show. Yeah. Absolutely.
But
I remember that was my. When on the Sci-Fi Channel they brought out the first Project A-ko. And they brought out Gray Side and Blue Side, and they would show them like on consecutive weeks. So like I would always have to be like, okay, everybody, like I need the TV for today, for this morning.
Yeah.
Because I know what's going on, and I have to make sure that I watch Project A-ko because it's amazing.
Well, that was the first one I saw, and actually the quality of the original Project A-ko movie is so good that for years I actually thought, because I saw Gray Side and Blue Side first, that was the original, and that the original movie was actually something that came later. But I wasn't as good at telling back then based on the animation quality.
Well, I didn't even know what anime was until Sci-Fi Channel came out with something that they called Saturday Anime. Like, there were a bunch of shows that I watched as a kid that turned out that they were actually localized Japanese things. Like, there was an animated version of The Little Prince. It was an animated show based on the book by the French guy whose name I can't pronounce. And like that was one of my favorite shows when I was a really little kid, like 4 or 5 years old kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I could watch that over and over again back then. And 20 years later I look it up and it's like, oh, that was animated by a Japanese studio.
Yeah,
The other one is TV Ontario I don't know where. I was too little. I didn't realize what I was seeing, I guess is the way to put it, or how to classify it. But TV Ontario got hold of an English version of the series that they called The Bush Baby. It was based on a book. And the Japanese did an animated version of the show, and it was a really good show. It was probably 40 some episodes in the series, and they would play like one episode every Saturday or something like that. And like it was nearly impossible to get 40 consecutive Saturdays where I could watch TV at that specific time. But I think I managed to actually see the whole series eventually. And man, that show was really good. It was it's basically about the daughter of a guy who was like one of the people that was a leader in Kenya before colonization ended, and basically colonization ends. Her family starts to head back to England, but she gets she basically misses the train, so to speak. She gets into this whole brouhaha with some poachers that are trying to that basically she witnessed something that they did, and they're trying to get to her, and she ends up in this journey across the entirety of Kenya. It's a really, really good show.
I think I've seen a couple of those. I remember The Little Prince. I don't remember anything about that show, but I do remember there was one that
the only television station that played it was TV Ontario, and they were only available in the Downriver area of Michigan because they were a Canadian channel that just happened to be available in Downriver, Michigan. Or no, it wasn't Downriver. It was the Garden City area. Right. So, like, I moved in 7th grade to the Downriver area, and I couldn't get the show anymore. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, there were. I mean, of course, there was like the speed racers and everything, but there were a lot of shows that like people our age. I've shown them like screenshots and things of these shows, and to see if they remember. They're like, oh yeah, I remember that, and like. There were two in particular. Now this one is weird. I'll start with the weird one.
Okay.
There was a movie that a Japanese studio did, and I'm sure we all saw it when we were kids. Anyone my age.
You're talking about Aladdin, right?
Yes. And we
still need to find that.
I have not been able to find what studio made it. It was based off of the original story where it was the magic lamp and the magic ring that both had the genie.
Yeah.
And they used to play it all the time on TV. It was usually like a Thanksgiving special, like in the early '80s.
Well, there were a bunch of those. Like, the Japanese did a version of it, and then Disney did a version of it. Like The Little Mermaid did that too. There was an animated version of The Little Mermaid that I think was from Japan originally. That was the original story where she dies in the end.
Yeah, but nobody remembers the Aladdin one. And I can't even find a reference to it on the internet. I did one time, and I finally found just like one webpage had a brief little blurb on it that didn't have any of the studio information, and there was one picture. And I finally was able to show it to our friend Brian, who I'd been telling about this show.
Here it is.
You found it?
Yeah, Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp, I think.
Well, I'll
hold on. Let me Skype you a link.
Yeah, let's go ahead and confirm this right now. It has been a while since I looked for it.
There's even a picture and everything. I figured it'd be on Anime News Network. I mean, they have a pretty extensive encyclopedia.
Well, we'll find out. Yep, that's it. That's it. That is it. So let's see what studio did this. Does it say? I don't look at Anime News Network that much.
Yeah, me neither.
Director was Yoshikatsu Kasai. Let's see.
Toei Animation.
Toei, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so somewhere there's a VHS copy of the English version of this kicking around. I'm pretty sure it never made it to DVD.
Well, it probably... I don't know.
This is another one that used to play on TV Ontario, and...
Yeah.
But there was another show. Now, this was one that I would always end up watching at my grandmother's when I was really young. It was... they used to play Grimm's Fairy Tale Adventures. And...
Yeah.
Most people remember that one if you either show them a picture or if you can, find the theme song on YouTube or something and let them listen. They're like, oh yeah, I remember that when I was a kid. And it was just, it was Grimm's Fairy Tales, and they did a bunch of animated episodes based on those fairy tales. One of my favorite ones was the one they did, the Brave Little Tailor was one that they did. But I think it was, I think they did like 30 or 40 episodes worth of Grimm's Fairy Tales. And that actually is still really good if you go and watch it today.
Yeah.
Like even as an adult, it's kind of entertaining. It's better than watching SpongeBob any day,
Yeah, certainly. That's definitely true.
Not that that's a very high bar, but
I don't know. Interesting. Tagalog cast. The dubbing was done by Cinelume. Interesting.
Are you still looking at
So
Aladdin?
I'm looking up the Bush Baby thing.
Oh, okay.
There was an English version of it, and it was actually pretty. If I remember correctly, it was pretty decent. But God knows there's no way to find that anymore today.
I remember that, when I was first getting into it, Cutie Honey was a big deal. And I was probably too young to even be watching that. So, and but I never really got around to seeing it anyway, so I just recently decided to, find the DVDs for that and scope that out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool now that it's like all those things you had trouble finding before, now you can go back and dig them up, and half the time you can watch them online on Crunchyroll or something. But like DVDs are so cheap now. It's like, oh, here's a 40 episode series, $20.
Yeah, pretty much.
And there's nothing wrong with new anime. If you take it as a percentage, there's probably the same amount of good versus bad. But it seems like there's just so much anime now that you run across the bad so much that you start to pine for the early years where it was a lot more likely you'd hit something that you'd really like when you were picking them out. So coming back full circle to what got us started on this is subtitles.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how Fansubs back in the day.
Oh yeah. I mean, they did amazing things with those eventually. I mean, it took them a while, but so I was reading actually a thing by what's his name? Robert Woodhead, the guy who's I think the head of, gosh, what's that company called? The one that did Writing Bean and stuff?
Was it Animego?
Yeah, Animego. And he was talking about how he was part of the company that did the first, anime dubs, basically. And they figured out that, if you do the letters in yellow and the outlines of the letters in brown, it works pretty well on VHS. Like, that was actually a thing that they had to figure out because, VHS could only change colors from pixel to pixel so rapidly, just as a limitation of the format. So the original, you get a lot of really bad subs early on, and you get a lot of really bad fan subs early on. But then there was this golden age where people started coming up with new file formats, like the MKV file format with they had additional they had stylized subs. I'm not sure exactly how that worked because I never actually did anything other than watch them. I never tried to make any, but they had the stylized subs, and they could do all kinds of really, really neat stuff. Like, there were some that were really basic, like make different characters' dialogue different colors, and then there was like you were talking about, the One Piece stuff.
Oh yeah, where they had like the morphing letters for the when they would do their attacks, and they would call out the names of their attacks, and they'd have letters that would like rotate and morph onto the screen in time with what they were saying. And a lot of studios got wise to, when jokes were being told, they wouldn't spoil the joke by having the text appear before the character was talking. A lot of, even today, a lot of the professional studios, like, the major studios that are just getting the translation and popping them on the screen, they don't put that much thought and effort into it. No. And actually, circa 2010 is probably... the golden era for fan subs, where people were they were in overdrive. They were doing
I'd
so
say it
many.
Probably spanned from 2010 to 2013 or 2014.
Well, probably started around 2007. So that.
No, because 2007 was where fan subs were starting to get good, but they weren't the really good stylized stuff. Didn't actually really show up until much later, and the reason for that was that the stylized stuff typically took huge amounts of processing to actually render in real time. Like I remember getting shows where they did stylized subs for the karaoke of the opening or ending themes, and I would always have to turn off the subtitles for those because they would cause my computer to bog down so much that the video would play at half speed. But the audio would play at the right rate.
Yeah. Well, 2007 was about when they started getting like everyone was doing really good translations.
Yeah, no, I mean, before 2007, if you got a fan sub, it was something that some guy did in a basement and put on a VHS for you, basically. But after that, people started actually making quality subs, and most of that stuff was distributed over the internet. So
Yeah, and the stuff that was coming out around 2010, even compared to the official releases that you buy today, was of better quality. Well,
like I don't think that Blu-rays have a whole lot of options for sub stylization, and it's really a lot of work. Like you would go to some fan sub websites, some fan sub group's website, and they'd have like 4 people working on the stylized subs, and like one of them would leave the group because he would get fed up with something,
Yeah.
and the subs would never be the same.
That's
Yeah, he's the only one who knew how to make the color, the text grow and then shrink.
Our tech guy left.
Well, no, because there would it would depend on which one left. Like,
Yeah.
if one of them left, you'd lose color. If one of them left, you'd lose motion. If one of them left, you'd lose karaoke timing.
Another one left, you'd lose the ability to do a good translation.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Shoot, we got to outsource now. No, it was, but it's it was just amazing to see. Like, it's almost kind of disappointing that that's not as big a thing anymore, because when it was like a mixed bag, when you could get both a fan sub of something and a VHS copy of something, and then you'd watch not VHS, DVD.
Well, I mean, the thing is that people always were like, oh, well, the fan subs, that's all like pirated, but like, hell, half the really good stuff that I bought because I found a fan sub and was like, this show is amazing.
Yeah, well, none of that would have even been coming out over here if it hadn't been for the fan subbers.
Well, it would have, but it would have come out 5 years later and no one would have cared.
Yeah, there wouldn't have been a fan base for them to distribute.
I mean, you have to remember that nowadays they do like simultaneous subtitles and even like simultaneous dubs these days.
Yeah.
Of stuff. And like, 3 years ago it was still, well, it'll take us a couple days. And 5 years ago it was like, yeah, see you in 6 months.
It's just they a lot of those, like, those nobody studios, those little studios that were just a couple of guys putting stuff together on a couple of computers, like emailing each other back and forth, getting subtitles done. They were still of better quality between the not even necessarily just the effects, just like the translation itself. And then you would go and buy the DVDs, and you would watch you'd read the subtitles on the DVD, and you'd be like, man, it kind of loses something, because you
remember the Higurashi DVDs?
Yeah, they lost a lot of personality.
Between
the fan subbers and the official release.
So the thing about it is that because it was all, because it was all on the down low, so to speak, there was actually competition between different groups. Like I remember back in the day when there would be 2 groups, and they would basically have a race every week to see which group could get their version of some show up. And so, like, I mean, who was like, I remember Chihiro fan subs did we'll get it done in 45 minutes, and like, amazing work that these people would do, and they had to do better than everybody else in order to keep people watching their stuff.
Yeah, it was fiercely competitive for almost for no reason. I mean, it wasn't like they were getting a kickback anywhere.
No, it was all in really good. It was usually in really good like spirits. Like, it was like, yeah, we could do this. We could do this in 45 minutes. And some other group would like, we can do it in 40 minutes. And they'd be like, okay, we said 45, but I think we could do it in 38.
Yeah,
and
it was entirely a labor of love. And
absolutely.
I think a lot of, like, I get in a lot of conversations with people that, they want to talk about, like artists will talk a lot about, you shouldn't work for exposure or anything. But I think a lot of times people are talking about a complete extreme of that, where it's like, you shouldn't let yourself be conned by someone who's not going to pay you for work that you're doing for them, and just, you never get anything for it. But, there's people out there that they care enough about what they do that's like, they're not going to fall for that pitfall anyway. They're doing what they do because they like it, and if they can find a way to make money doing it, they'll do it. But in the case of Fansubs, it's just pure. We want to share this with other people. We love it. We want to show other people how cool it is, and that's. It's just I think that mindset alone makes it irrelevant whether or not you're getting paid for something, because you'll be good enough at it to where someone will want to pay you for it.
Well, I mean, some things, the value of the product is not really tangible until after you get it, right? So, like, if you don't have a portfolio to show me, and I'm trying to commission art from you, what do I do, right? How do I know that what I'm going to get is any good?
Yeah, there's two options. Either I go to someone else, or you produce something for me that I can gauge your work off of.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times, people are talking about, they're mostly talking about, like, they're angry that someone would come to them and say, hey, will you do work for me for free, and your payment will be the exposure. I don't think that what they actually mean is, they would never do it, because obviously, a lot of these people are drawing stuff and putting it up on Facebook all the time, and they're not getting paid for it. So they don't mind doing the work and showing it to people. And in fact, that is a way of building their exposure.
Well, I mean, the problem is that, so the problem that usually arises is that if you are going to an artist to ask them to make something for you, and you're saying that in order for your exposure to be worth anything, you must already have an audience. And if you already have an audience, then you can pay your artist for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just one of them things where, I think there's a lot of people that take it too much to heart. Like the very idea that, someone would ask them to do something like in trade for something like, hey, I can maybe get you some fans here. I mean, marketers do it all the time. Marketers, that's what. I mean, that's what social media basically is.
Yeah, if you're planning on releasing a book and you know that it's and you know that you personally are going to spend money advertising that book, you could make the case. You could say, look, I'm on a shoestring budget. I need art for the cover for my book. Here's a copy of the book. Take a look at it, see if you like it, see if you think it'll sell. I'm going to pay for all the advertising. If you give me a cover, I'll put your name on the cover. That's I think a reasonable trade, right?
Yeah, and actually, I mean,
obviously
that doesn't come up too much as far as I know with writers. I mean, I'm on a lot of different writers groups, and for the most part, people are like, there's people that are like, hey, is there somewhere I can get a cover cheap? But for the most part, it seems like people are willing to pay. I think a lot of...
Well, it's the kind of thing that you would only really throw to someone that you already know. It's not like you would call up someone apropos of nothing and say that.
Yeah, no, I think that some of it comes from, like, there were a lot of... I heard that there were instances of, like, Disney asking people to do things just for the exposure, and that's ridiculous, because Disney has money. Like, why would you not pay me? Why would you even come to me and ask me to do something as Disney?
Yeah, the fact that Disney came to you means that you're doing well. The fact, it's kind of weird. I mean, like, but then there's also the possibility that Disney will be like, well, okay, so here's your portfolio, but over what period have you produced this portfolio? And let's say we need you to produce, X pieces of art per week. We need to know that you're capable of doing that. And the one way to do that is to either have you do some work for us for exposure to start, or to, have a trial period for employment or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say that, like, I mean, okay, so let's say I could actually draw, and Disney came to me and said, hey, how about you work for a week and prove you can do it, and then we'll pay you. There's nothing wrong with that, even though you're working that week just for the exposure, basically.
But if they say do it for 6 months,
then it's like, well, I need to eat, so sorry.
So no.
I mean, I hear people complain about the idea that someone would ask them to work for exposure a lot, but my honest opinion of it is, if you're stupid enough to do it, and if you're stupid enough to let someone string you along and never pay you for doing something, that's on you. That's not on them.
Well, I mean, it's an asshole move to do it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's...
I mean, I'm not going to defend the person who tries to exploit someone, but I mean, the point is that it's not necessarily like it's not necessarily a terribly offensive thing to ask just to see.
Yeah, no, it's
right?
it's
like,
not at all. Now if someone fools you into it,
well, that's fraud.
yeah, that's fraud. That's you can take them to court for that. But like, it's just an argument I heard a lot from people about just artists are like, oh well, you're not going to make much money with some of the stuff you're doing anyway, and then someone wants you to work for free. It's like, well, I mean, what are you getting out of it? That's what's important.
Well, yeah, the question is, what do you get out of it? I mean, if they say exposure, but they don't actually have any way to provide exposure, then, that's not worth anything. If they say exposure, and they say exposure because they will provide exposure, but then they also have money, then it's like, well, I mean, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. But if they're, I can see scenarios where it would work.
Yeah. I mean,
and you can do this in things other than art too. Like, if I were to open like a online tutoring business, for instance, I could say first hour free.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, that seems like a thing that I would do. But I wouldn't give out some kind of like hour free coupon and just like paper them over everywhere, right? It'd be like, you sign up with your email gets attached to an account, your account gets an hour free, that kind of thing. But like,
I mean, it's just, it kind of, like, I feel like there's too much animosity against the idea. Because I mean, if you think about it, building a portfolio is working for exposure. Building a following on Facebook or Twitter by posting your art is working for exposure. Going to college and getting a degree is working for exposure. Especially, if you're, well, I guess they pay
No, you're working for credentials at college is what you're doing.
It's kind of the same thing.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
But, just coming back to, anime and subtitlers, it's like, think about all the time that some of these people poured into this, and I really doubt that a lot of these subtitling groups were picked up by professional studios. I think that for the most part they ended up doing their own thing. I don't know. I didn't really follow that.
I think there were a few cases of people getting picked up, but I think it was very uncommon.
Yeah,
The problem is that
I didn't really have a point connecting those two things. It was just something I thought of.
The problem is that the fan made material scene has a very different character in the U.S. as compared to Japan, because in Japan, derivative works can still be sold.
Yeah,
like they have they have whole festivals
and
the doujinshi market, fan remixes of Toho music or whatever. That stuff can all Toho, the Toho universe, quote unquote, has an entire convention dedicated to people making fan art, fan goods of the Toho universe and selling it. That's, I mean, and the problem, and that works out really well in Japan. They have this huge vibrant community of makers of fan goods, and sometimes those makers of fan goods make it big somewhere else. And that's what happened to Ryukishio 7. He was a Twilight expansion or Seventh expansion was a doujin group until he started doing When They Cry, and then it's like boom. It's like, wow. But like here in the US, most companies, their first, just because of the way that copyright law is structured and enforced, most companies' first thing that they do is just send a cease and desist.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's that's what pushes this whole thing underground, and it also makes it so that the people that do this stuff as a labor of love, basically get pissed on for it. And they don't deserve it. They're not actually. They're not. They're doing something that no one else is trying to do, and in the U.S. they weren't even freaking charging anything for it.
Yeah. Plus, it's. I mean, my hobby practically wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Fansubbers trying to bring this stuff out here. I mean, the release rate for things was so slow in the early 2000s that it's. I mean, people that are 18, just in their teens and early 20s today, have no idea just how much content is available as opposed to back in 2000.
Back then. Yeah, no, I mean, I remember, there was only, I remember looking for DVD box sets of, anime stuff, and, like, there was only, like, 4 or 5 choices, and they were all, like, big-name series that, I think the two that I picked up back in the day were Tenchi Muyo, as I mentioned earlier, and Trigun.
Yeah,
both of those had nice big DVD box sets early on, but they were two of the they were few and far between. Other than those, I mean, like, there were not many series that got a big DVD box set release.
And if you wanted to watch cartoons in the 80s and 90s before that, you wanted to see anything like that, you were pretty much limited to, like, Popeye and Hanna-Barbera, and Bugs Bunny, and whatever Disney released that year.
Yeah, pretty much.
So we're living in good times.
I mean, the explosion and rapidity by which we're getting this stuff brought over here now is amazing. So
it's like same-day delivery on Crunchyroll.
Yeah, pretty much.
Not to mention, like, I mean, manga was barely a thing.
Oh yeah, it was hard. I mean, it was.
Viz was reprinting everything as, like, 26 to 32 page comics, like American comics, the big 8 by whatever. And you were basically buying 1/8 of the normal manga each week, ordering it through these companies, and you'd have to get one manga book would be like 8 different comics that you had to buy to read through it at $2.99, $3.99 a pop.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, I think it was Dark Horse that did Oh My Goddess, and then Viz was doing Rama and Tenchi. And there really wasn't much more than that, actually. There was...
It was a pretty weak scene at the time, yeah.
Like, I remember there was... they had a Blade of the Immortal comic, and the first issue was, like, 6 pages, and then the entire rest of the 26-page thing was advertisements for other comics.
Yeah, we mentioned advertisements in comics before, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even remember exactly when manga started to pick up in, like, its book format over here, but I remember, like...
I remember though that there was that company... God, what was the first company that actually started printing them from right to left? And they had that silly page at the beginning, at the quote unquote beginning of all of their books.
To tell you
the first company that did that.
I think it was Tokyo Pop, wasn't it?
I think it was Tokyo Pop, yeah, and like that was when stuff started finally picking up, right? Like finally there was a manga section in Borders. Borders is also dead.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I remember seeing those and saying, "Oh wow, I haven't seen comics brought out here in the U.S. and in large quantities and ever before." Like, they were always like little one-off things that you would have to hunt for, basically. And they were all like image flipped for the most part, and so that made it really hard to certain things became unintentional jokes, basically.
Yeah, I think that more than anything, Tokyo Pop probably said it'd probably be easier for us to print these if we didn't have to flip everything around.
Well, yeah, that's definitely true. I'm just amazed that it took people that long to figure it out.
And then, of course, the way you market that is that you're giving the original content the way it was originally presented.
Exactly.
But it was it was very nice to, like, be at the proper age to observe how all that changed over time.
Yeah.
Because it's I mean, what else is there left to streamline at this point?
Not much. I mean,
the only thing that really interferes with anyone's desire to watch, Japanese cartoons at this point is the Japanese not wanting to release things overseas.
Pretty much. But these days, pretty much everything gets picked up by somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of one of the effects of having such a... The people that are into anime in the West are... They tend to be very, like, compartmentalized or something like that, maybe? And so, like, a lot of these companies are finding that whatever they bring out here, there's some niche population that will pick up on it.
Yeah. And I think...
That's how Strike Witches came out here. True story.
It's someone's very specific fetish, but not mine.
The tails must be between 8 and 12 inches long.
Well, they got that new show now with the girls that are like horses that are running races. I've been calling it BoJack Horse Girls. I don't remember the name of it, but
isn't it just called Uma Musume?
I think so. I think it started as an app game, and
yeah, I think so. Well, no, so I read an article or something on it, and they were talking about how it's actually like it's basically done by... It was basically started up by a company that did a bunch of horse racing games. I don't think they're necessarily like smartphone app games. I think there are a lot of horse racing video games in Japan. It's very popular for some reason. And so one of the companies that does those games, I think, started this up, basically.
Because I think someone had told me about it a long time ago. I'm pretty sure there's an app for it, because if I'm remembering correctly, that was the one...
I'm certain that they've made a smartphone version of the game, but the games themselves, there are these horse racing games going all the way back to the Famicom, or probably earlier.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean that someone had mentioned that there was an app in Japan it was really weird, and I think it was the horse one. I think they were like, yeah, it's these. Oh. You're basically managing a girl who's part horse, and then at the end of every race, it plays a song or something. And I thought that was so ridiculous that I looked it up on my phone. I tried to get it, and then of course Google, for some retarded reason, will not let you use the international market. It's like, oh, your phone is in this location, or your Android version is this version. We can't let you download things from the Japanese store. It's like right there, you can see it. You can hit download, but then it just tells you can't get it. So so much for breaking down those walls. But I signed up for the newsletter just because I thought it was so funny, and I think I'm still getting Japanese newsletters about this game. I don't know. I haven't read any of them in a while. I'll have to see if that's what it is.
That's great. The Japanese seem to grab... So this is the other thing, is that... So when I was a kid, I watched a bunch of shows, and shows that I liked turned out to be Japanese. The other thing is that a bunch of game series that I played turned out to be way more popular in Japan than they were in the US.
Yeah.
Like Wizardry is probably the best example. Like, Wizardry in the US was kind of a niche game series, and it only got the 8 games that Surtech and associated companies released. Wizardry 1 through 8 basically is all you got in the US. And in Japan, there is so much Wizardry stuff. Like, I mean, actually licensed Wizardry stuff. Like that whole PlayStation 3, there was 2 games there, and they had the whole thing was called Wizardry Renaissance, as like, we want to bring Wizardry back from being kind of dormant to being a thing again. There's a bunch of Wizardry titles for consoles and stuff that were only available in Japan. There's a company called... Gosh, what's the company called?
Experiencing?
I think Experience, but it might be Starfish, actually. That actually was making games that they thought they had licensed the Wizardry title for, and it turned out that they had licensed the Wizardry title from the wrong company, and so they had to stop using the Wizardry title. There's some weird story like that. I mean, the wizardry title itself in the U.S. has a weird history because basically, from what I understand, some company bought the rights to it, but didn't, but or like they I guess leased the rights to it, but like they stopped paying royalties, and so I think what's his name, Andrew something or other. I think Andrew something. I forget his last name.
Let's just call him Andrew something or other.
Andrew something or other, the guy, one of the guys who created Wizardry, along with that guy who's now in Animago, Woodhead, Robert Woodhead. Andrew, gosh, I wish I could remember his last name. Anyway, he had to like sue this company in Ontario that was like sitting on the Wizardry licensing thing, but not paying any royalties like they were supposed to or something. It was some really bizarre story. But it's like, so you have these games from Japan that are called Wizardry, and they say Wizardry is a trademark of like 0378466666432 Ontario. It's like, what the hell is this?
Well, if I was to, look out over the horizon, I think that the next big turnover for the anime world is going to be when all these Japanese studios that are on the rocks are, I don't know if they're going to start devouring each other or if they're all going to slowly start turning into studios that, because I think there's only going to be a few studios that continue to put out really top quality animated series pretty soon, because a lot of them are in financial straits. I think you're already seeing a lot more of the ones where it's like a 10-minute episode of something that kind of looks like it was animated in Flash, slightly better than that. But
well, that seemed like it showed up and then it kind of died away because
and now
those shows weren't really good moneymakers, I think.
Well, now what you're getting is a lot of them where it's like they're animated decently well, but there's not as much actual animation in them, and like they look nice, but there's not that much actual animation, and they're only 10 minutes long a piece. I think there'll probably be a wave of things like that while the studios are trying to figure out, how are we going to be money makers, because they used to operate on budgets where everyone was hand drawing everything and they had to have a lot of storage space for things. Computers came along and they kind of streamlined everything, but then it became a rush to each studio had to kind of rush to outdo the other studios in terms of quality. So it became these big things where it's like, everything's in 1080p and now 4K. We're doing these, giant boards where everything looks so beautiful, and now everybody has to have their own style. Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a good show. I haven't really watched it. That No Game, No Life. But I think everything is drawn where the outlines are all done in color ink instead of just black.
Yeah.
And it looks really weird to me. So, like, people are trying a whole bunch of different things to... and I think that, they've kind of stretched themselves beyond their means at this point. To where you're getting shows that are animated well, but you're starting to see a lot more mixes of animation and computer graphics because it's cheaper.
Well, the funny thing about that is that there was a show that came out, what was it, last year or a year and a half ago maybe, called Kemono Friends, which is really, really, I mean, let's be honest, it was poorly animated. It was CG, the characters were all CG, they were fairly simple character models, not a whole lot going on animation-wise, but the show became an amazing hit in Japan. And, I watched an episode or two of it. No, wait, I think I actually watched the whole thing eventually, but, I mean, it was okay. It was definitely made as though it was targeted at children, and somehow it became vastly popular among a bunch of, among basically everybody in Japan. It has the exact structure of like one of those edutainment shows, one of the good edutainment shows from like the 90s, where basically it's a kind of a cutesy little show about characters, going through some stuff, and like the commercial breaks are punctuated by like short talks by people who work at zoos, and they actually talk about like real animals and stuff.
Yeah.
And the show actually has a pretty decent plot near the end where like stuff actually starts to happen, and it's like, oh wow, a bunch of cool things happen. But it's still very much seems like it was produced as a kids show, and the response that they got for it is really, I think it surprised everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even have my feelers out for that kind of thing, and yet it kept coming across my radar, mostly in the form of hilarious memes and whatnot. But
yeah, well, there were definitely a lot of memes and fan based memes and memeified things that probably shouldn't have been memeified, but yes.
Yeah, almost certainly in that case.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're probably going to see a lot more CG stuff. Unfortunately, I'm kind of...
Well, the CG stuff is starting to actually get better. Like, it used to
be
that
some of it looks really good.
Like garbage. All of it looked like garbage. And now they've managed to kind of get... I watched a show... Gosh, I don't remember what it was. But I watched a show recently that used CG to do the extras. Like, the large numbers of extras. But... it was the first time that I had seen a show do all of the extras were unique, and like the extra work that showed that they put into it was really nice to see.
There's also some though that it's got that really like, I guess jarring is the best way to put it. It's just you look at it and it's
PS2 cel shaded?
Yeah, like the Godzilla anime that came out recently. It wasn't a bad show, but just watching it, you're like, something is wrong with the way that all of these people look at each other.
Yeah,
I think
that is definitely a thing.
I think we're in for a slew of budget CG animes before we make it to whatever.
I mean, the thing is that if they can do the animation on the cheap and actually come out with good stories, I'm all for it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I've never really liked CG, but there's a big difference between not liking, say, Pixar movies because I think they're ugly, and also I think they've rehashed the same script about 40 times, and they haven't even made...
No, you're thinking of... there was a really great meme that I saw where that was like, it was comparing Pixar movies with like, what's the other one, DreamWorks or something like that, and it's like, in Pixar movies this happens, and it's like talking about and there are thematic similarities between the Pixar movies. I agree with that, but like it was talking about how in this movie, in Toy Story, toys come to life, or they've actually already always been alive, and they go on adventures, and it's like talking about all these different, at least really interesting and unique seed crystal ideas for these movies. I don't watch a lot of Pixar movies, so I'm not sure how well they were necessarily executed. But, the ideas behind Pixar movies are usually pretty interesting, even if the execution is kind of meh. But then they compared it to DreamWorks, and they were like, as compared to DreamWorks, where what we do is we make animal characters that make this face, and it was like some shit-eating grin, and it just showed pictures of every character from every DreamWorks movie making the exact same shit-eating grin, and it was like, wow.
Yeah, no, DreamWorks is an abomination. That's the nicest way I can put it. Like here's how they make a DreamWorks movie. So they take a very like. They find someone that they can get to work for exposure and write them a script, and then they go to Justin Timberlake and ask him for a few songs, and then some executive sits back and looks at the script and says, "Put the songs here and here." And then
they hire Robert De Niro to do the voice of like a shark or something.
Yes, Robert De Niro does the voice of the shark, and then right about here I need someone to fart. Okay, go to production.
And everybody make this shit-eating grin.
Yes. Well, I think that's how the people that are putting it together feel when they get handed the script.
It might be.
It's like, okay, I guess I got to do this.
God. That thing that company, what was it called? Phantom Events or something?
Fathom Events.
Fathom Events. That thing that they did last year where they were doing all those classic anime movies in actual theaters. Like, I saw Castle of Cagliostro in a theater, and it was glorious. Even today, like just the animation quality, the story, the music, everything about that movie. Did we already do an episode on Castle of Cagliostro?
We did, but I haven't
kind of
put
feel
it
like
up
we
anywhere
did.
yet. So I think that we'll actually put it up after this.
Oh God!
But we did one about Castle of Cagliostro and Nausicaa, because I went to see those as well. And
those movies are so amazing. Like even today,
just back to back,
I mean,
back to back. One week
back
and
to
then
back.
the next week they played my two favorite animated movies ever in theaters.
I know. What are the chances of that? Like that was so great. I hope they do something like that. I mean, Castle of Cagliostro was. I hadn't watched it in a long time because it was like, I never actually had a copy of it. I think I watched the copy that you had long ago, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. And I sat down in that theater and I watched that movie, and it was just like, I don't even have words to describe how moving that movie is. It's so good.
If it hadn't been for Castle of Cagliostro, I never would have investigated the old Maurice Leblanc, Arsène Lupin books. I would have never known that they were like some of the best mystery books ever written. Like, Maurice Leblanc was contemporary with Sherlock Holmes, and we'll save this conversation for another time.
You mean Arthur Conan Doyle?
Well, yeah, I mean, Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, whatever. That's all anyone's ever going to remember him for. Much
Maurice
to his
LeBlanc
chagrin.
is a real person.
Yes, no, I meant Arthur Conan Doyle.
I know what you meant.
So he was contemporary with Doyle, and he had created Lupin to be like the anti-Sherlock Holmes. And he actually did a story. Of course, at the time he couldn't call it. It was called The Blonde Lady. And it was basically Lupin versus Sherlock Holmes. But they called him Holmlock Shears, and in another version it was I can't remember. It was
he did little anagrams of that name before a couple times. A couple different ones.
But he did a book where it was just Lupin giving Sherlock Holmes a rough ride of solving this mystery. And it's one of the greatest mystery books I've ever read, and that's not even the best one. Like the best book that Maurice Leblanc did with Lupin was The Extraordinary Adventures of Arsène Lupin, Gentleman Burglar. And just for the first 3 chapters alone, where it's like he opens by having Lupin be arrested, and in the second chapter, Lupin commits a robbery, but he's in prison the whole time, so nobody can figure out how he does it.
I love those books. They're so great.
And then the third story is the greatest prison break book, the greatest prison break story of all time, hands down. Yep. Anyone that wants to argue with me can bring it. Just bring it. I'll be that guy sitting at the. God, have you seen those? It's that meme of that guy sitting at a table where it says something changed my mind. That's what you're looking at here. It's. You're not gonna change my mind. No, Lupin is my second favorite mystery book character. Nero Wolfe, of course, being the first one. So we're gonna have to have a talk about those characters soon. But I think we've covered a lot.
I think we've covered everything that is relevant to the specific chunk of anime topic that we chose for today.
I mean, we were basically just going to talk about subtitles then and now, but we
were basically just going to talk randomly on Skype for a while, and then I was like, we should record this.
Yeah, that was a good idea.
I think it was, actually, because we managed to get an hour and 10 minutes out of it.
All right, let's go ahead and see you next time, I guess.
All right, see y'all later, everybody. Thanks for listening.